By the way, it's not too late if you'd like to submit a question in writing and pass it up this way. We may have the opportunity to ask a few more, so if you have any questions that have come to mind in the course of the conversation, please do so. And Dr. Dunn, you'll be first on this next round. Many of our U.S. servicemen and women, many in harm's way even as we speak today, are being neglected, cut short on what they deserve as far as health care and other GI or VA benefits. What will and can you do to address these issues?
Thank you very much. You've asked questions near and dear to my heart. I come from a military background, multi-generations. My father was a veteran, his fathers were. My wife's story is the same. Her parents, every generation from the Revolutionary War to Afghanistan in our families has served in the military. We have a son who just got back. We're proud of our veterans. We love our veterans. And we are treating them in a ghastly fashion when they return back. The Veterans Administration shorts them in many, many ways. And the psychological support that they need stands out as one of the gravest of the shortages that they have. The VA system is monumentally expensive. There are 365,000 civilians employed in the Veterans Administration. The cost of that program for the care that it delivers and the care that it fails to deliver is just unbelievable. We need to offer the veterans the choice of getting their care outside the VA or in the VA.
Thank you, sir.
And let the money follow that.
Mr. Moran.
This is near and dear to me. My nephew, who I raised like a son, was in Iraq. He and his driver got hit with an RPG. They made it back, but not quite the same way that they left. And I will not sit back and let our government treat our young men and women like pawns in a chess game. It is not going to happen. You will not see that come from me. Beyond that, as a police officer, I work countless suicides of our veterans. I've read their suicide notes that were their last cry of help, for help, that went unanswered. This is not acceptable. They deserve better. I will stand with our veterans. We will make sure they get the health care and the psychological care that they deserve. We owe that to them, and they will get it if I'm in Washington.
Thank you, sir. Ms. Thomas.
We need to start treating our veterans with the honor and the respect that they deserve. And it is appalling that even under the Republicans' control, the abuse at the VA continues. The VA secretary needs to be immediately fired. He is comparing lines at the VA to lines in Disneyland. I have put out a full-scale plan to help our veterans, which is on our website. We need to let the veterans make their own healthcare decisions. Let the dollars follow the veterans. So if they want to seek private care, they should be able to do that. And the VA should operate not as a bureaucracy, but as a medical clinic, like the Mayo Clinic. And we need to force VA administrators to fire employees who are not doing their jobs. Right now, they're giving them raises. This has to change, and this all has been occurring under the establishment Republicans' watch. That's why we need to elect fresh, new, strong conservative voices who will go up to Washington.
Thank you, ma'am. And Mr. Sakai, you have the final word on this question.
Yes, I of course agree wholeheartedly with the sentiments that have been expressed by my fellow candidates. I agree with Mary's suggestion, or Mary's point about making healthcare available, private healthcare available to the veterans. But the problem is, this illustrates what happens when the government is running an agency, when the government is getting themselves involved in what typically is a private sort of business. It's a mess. They don't ever do anything right. And this goes all the way back to the Union Central Pacific Railroad, when it was a complete scandal-ridden total flop. And that's the problem. So unless you give the veterans the opportunity to have private health care, it's going to continue, just because the government is not equipped to run things efficiently.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Moran, you will start the next round of questions. What life, business, or professional experience do you have that will make you an effective congressman or woman?
I live this. I live out here with you. I run my own business. I worked as a police officer. I've seen people at their best, and I've seen them at their worst. I'm not an establishment lawyer. I've not worked for the government my career. I've never sat in front of Congress and lobbied for or against anything. What makes me ready for this job? Because I'm one of you. And it's about time that we have our voice heard there instead of a special interest and someone that's not had enough time outside of the government employment.
Thank you. Ms. Thomas.
Well, frankly, we've got thousands of years of experience in Washington right now, and they are not getting the job done. We need to elect fresh, new, strong conservative voices who will stand up to the Washington establishment and say no more. No more taxes, no more wasteful spending, no more regulations. I actually have had extensive experience working on issues that directly impact the 2nd District. I worked on the Apalachicola Bay and strategizing on how to bring freshwater flows back to the Bay, and ultimately we filed a lawsuit in the U.S. Supreme Court against Georgia to get our waters back. I also served as the governor's representative against the Department of Justice to secure our state and local interests after the Deepwater Horizon oil spill. And I was the governor's representative on the Florida Defense Support Task Force, where we worked to protect our military bases in the next BRAC and ensure that they will be safe from encroachment. Mostly what we need in Washington is a fresh conservative voice.
Well, this tends to go back to what I was saying initially, and that is that it's going to be the case that pretty much everybody who seeks office in a conservative district is going to say they're going to support conservative causes. But you know, this has been going on for years. People have been telling us this. They've been running as conservatives, and something happens to them when they get to Washington. And they govern as moderates or liberals. I can pledge to you that I won't do that. And how do you know? Because I have been fighting them all my life. I have been fighting these issues. I fought Obamacare. I went up to Washington to fight for Terry Schiavo, that she might be given a right to a stay. I went to Washington to fight for the Internet Decency Act. I fought, and my record would reflect that I have fought for these issues throughout my life, and you would know that I will not back off from them in Congress.
Thank you, sir. Dr. Dunn, you've got final word.
Thank you. All candidates, I think, do sound alike on the stump. What you have to do is look at their backgrounds behind them, see what they've done in order to actually judge who they are. I have a history of organizing large groups of professionals, bringing together their efforts and delivering solutions. I did it in the military, I did it in healthcare, and I've done it in business successfully. And this, I'm not a politician. This isn't some new career path for me. There's nothing I need or want in Washington except a better future for all of our children. And I'm willing to sacrifice and fight to get it. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Ms. Thomas, you will start off the next round. What is the single most compelling issue facing Florida's 2nd Congressional District today?
I think the most important issue that's really facing not only our district, but our country is radical Islamic terrorism. And as we've seen from the horrific attacks that occurred in Orlando, we need to have strong voices up there. Voices who will stand by people like Donald Trump and fight ISIS. They are out here, radical Islamic terrorists, and we are allowing them into our country. We need to stop that. We need to stop immigration from all countries that harbor or support terrorism or terrorists. And we need to fight for our country. We haven't been doing that. In our country, in the world, we're actually seen as weak right now. I believe in Ronald Reagan's peace through strength. We need to increase the size and strength of our military and develop the most technologically advanced forces. And when we need to use force, we need to use it to its fullest capacity.
Mr. Sakaia.
I think that is probably the most urgent issue, the one that Mary identified. And I think I am equipped to address that issue because I have fought terrorism. In fact, even to the point that I was called to Washington one day. I was told I needed to be there the next day. And they said they'd tell me when I got there why. And I got there and they said that the head of the Colombian Coastal Cartel had been recorded in a conversation saying that they planned to take out the U.S. attorney from the Northern District of Florida, and that would be me. And so I've been there. I fought these people, and I think I have some sense of what it's like to fight those who are murdering innocent people, like the Jamaican posse that was sending a bomb here to Mariana Gardens to murder someone at that time.
Thank you, sir. Dr. Dunn.
Thank you. You asked what was the single most overriding important issue to the nation. And on Friday, I would have said it was health care. As I looked at the premiums going up 40 to 60% next year and struggled with how we were going to pay for that. On Saturday, I thought it was the economy. It's stagnant, the jobs picture is awful, and we're so deep in debt that we can't even conceive of the debt that we have. On Sunday, it became national security. I think that we can't take any of these in isolation and say that is the most important question. We are going to have to fight on multiple fronts. One of them is not the bathroom question, I agree. This is where we need to fight, on these three things: in healthcare, the economy, jobs, national security, abroad and at home. If we engage in an intelligent way, all of these, I think that we can bring our country back on track. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Moran, you get the last word on this question.
I think our greatest threat is sending the same establishment insiders to Washington and expecting a different result. That is the very definition of insanity. These problems aren't new, and it doesn't help us to continue to restate the problems. We need to fix some things. We need to send some new people to Washington, and a fresh face isn't going to make it any different. A fresh jar of the same medicine that hasn't worked for 100 years isn't going to help you this time. Let's start sending some people up there that are going to look at this differently and stand up for what we want, not take no for an answer, and come back and be able to look the people in the eye that we asked to send us up there after we've come home. You'll be able to look me in the eye when I come back, because I will not waver.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Sakaia, you'll be first on this question. This was recently submitted by the audience. There is not a single person on the panel who can accomplish their proposed ideas alone. What type of networking or coordination do you propose to achieve your goals once you're in Washington?
Well, I think anyone who has worked with me would know that, I am principled. When it comes to certain principles, I am not going to budge, because I feel as Martin Luther did when he said that, I am bound by the clear testimony of Scripture. My conscience lies captive to the Word of God. Here I stand. I can do no other. And I feel that way about certain issues. However, where I can compromise and where I can work with people, everyone around me would know that I'm someone that is willing to be cooperative and willing to work out ways of compromising in the same way I think that Ronald Reagan did and accomplished much in that fashion. So I agree, it can't be done alone. And I would indeed be willing to work with people and to compromise when we're dealing with issues that are not basic, fundamental principle issues.
Thank you, sir. Dr. Dunn.
Thank you. I think government is, as you said, inherently a team sport. However, teams need leaders. Now, I have a history of being a leader in business, in healthcare, and in the military. One leads by making coalitions. You work with the people around you. You have to work productively with the people around you. In the state of Florida, we're going to have a minimum of 9 new congressmen out of 27. We need to be able to build a pro-Florida coalition. We need to be able to work with people, that agree with us, and we need to be able to push the ball down the field, up back and forth across the field. That's the history that I've had all my life, and it's really why I'm going to Congress. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Moran.
Washington is broken. So this is not about getting endorsements from career politicians saying that you'll be the best one to go to Washington. This is about going up there and making changes. You want to talk about being able to negotiate? Stand between a drug-crazed teenager with a butcher knife and the mother that he wants to kill. All three of us are still alive today. That's called negotiation. If you can do that, there is nothing in Washington, D.C. that will scare me. I will be able to build some partnerships, and we will stand together, and your voice will be heard.
Thank you, sir. And Ms. Thomas, you have final word on this question.
Well, I was proud to have been endorsed by the House Freedom Caucus. And there are a core group of conservative congressmen and women who are standing up for our conservative and our Christian ideals in Washington. They're the ones who got John Boehner out of office, and I'm proud to have their support. But in my work as Governor Scott's representative in negotiations against the Department of Justice, the liberal Obama administration and the Department of Justice were saying that Florida had no environmental damage, and so we shouldn't get any money. But we had huge economic damages. And I was one of the ones of our team who remained firm and got the liberal Obama administration over to our side, and we ended up getting a good result for our state. That's the same thing that we need to do in Washington. There is far too much compromising going on, compromising with Obama and the liberals. And we need to have people that will get them over to our side and not compromise our strong, core conservative ideas.
Thank you, ma'am. Dr. Dunn, you'll start this next round. What can and will you plan to do about the tax difference on imported goods, which are taxed less, versus exported goods, which are taxed more, that's killing local manufacturing, such as what we enjoy here in Washington County?
So we have a topsy-turvy trade world right now where Americans are punished at multiple levels by taxation. Where the corporations are taxed so high that it's hard for them to be here in the first place and produce them, and then the products that are being made elsewhere in the world scoot in at artificially low prices because they aren't taxed at home, and they get a chance to sell them at a far lower rate because of that. It's clearly damaging our ability to be self-sufficient manufacturer and deliver manufactured goods and services here in the United States. And we need to turn this around. We need to make a much more friendly trade environment that helps Americans prosper, manufacture, export, make things, and deliver services at home and abroad. We can do that with better tax laws and with better treaties.
10 seconds.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Moran.
The other day we were at a forum and we were asked this question about trade agreements and import and export tariffs. And they said, well, maybe we can talk to a senator that may or may not change your position on something as far as tariffs and taxes. And I said, this is exactly the problem that we're facing. We don't have businessmen up there in Washington that have actually produced something. I've produced things. This is what my company does. I work with companies and individuals overseas. I know what it's like to do that. I know what trade is about. And if you don't get someone up there that truly understands business and has worked in the private industry and worked and imported and exported items that you've produced, then you just don't understand. And you're back to theories again instead of real life experiences. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Ms. Thomas.
I believe in free, fair, and balanced trade because that brings prosperity and security to all nations who engage in this. But we need to make sure that our American workers and our corporations are protected. And one of the things that we need to do to help our manufacturing industry, we need to decrease corporate taxes. Corporate taxes right now are as high as 40%. And in my plan, I call for having a tax that is 14.5%. and also allowing corporations to bring their money back to the United States at a 0% rate. We're going to create jobs. We're going to have economic growth. We need to take these measures, and we need to protect our country.
Thank you, ma'am. And Mr. Sakai, you've got final word on this question.
I agree that principally the problem is that we have no more belief in our capitalistic free market system here in this country. And it seems as though we have conceded to, or at least our president has sought to move us into the direction of a socialist and secular country. And part of that process is convincing people that the socialist sort of approach to the government control of production is something that we should look favorably upon. And so the whole thing is mixed up in that regard. And until we get our corporate taxes down, they're 39.5%. The developed nations of the world have their corporate taxes are at 24%. Until we get ours down and where we can compete on the same level, we're going to constantly be behind in that regard.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Moran, you'll start this next round. Where's Fletcher? Fletcher Dillmore standing up here. He headed up our local Young Republicans. He's currently attending FSU. And this will just simply be a short answer from each of you. He has asked that I ask you, if elected, will you be the keynote speaker at FSU College Republican Gala next spring? That date to be announced. And we understand that you can't make a commitment because we don't know what that date is, but Mr. Moran, you'll start the next round of questions as well, but if you would start this one off, and I'll give you all a chance to at least answer his question.
I'd love to, and Dottie sitting right there handles my schedule, give her the dates, we'll make every possible attempt to be there.
Thank you, Ms. Thomas.
As the only candidate on this stage who is a Seminole, I say that I will be there. Go Knowles. And I believe that it's time for a new generation of leadership in Washington. It's time to get some fresh, new conservative voices up there.
Thank you, Mr. Sakai.
Yeah, I think you had enough of me this year, didn't you? When I was clearly the best. They had all of us there this year. We had a lot of fun, so of course I would.
And Dr. Dunn.
Fletcher, I wouldn't miss it for the world. I had a great time. This last time was a heck of an event, by the way. 300 people and sit-down dinner. I'm so impressed that the college Republicans could pull that off. I'll be there, win or lose.
Thank you. And Mr. Moran, as I pointed out, you will be the first to answer this actual question. And it's very abbreviated, so will you allow all veterans to use any medical facility and any doctor? And I'm presuming that what they're asking is, obviously now veterans are required to go to certain facilities, and is there something that you are able and will work towards should you be elected?
Yes. I'd like to first go back a little bit, though, because I got to tell you, I take exception to say that businesses cannot compete in a global market. I have more cars that I've manufactured in Europe than I have in Florida. Yeah, it's tough, but it can be done. So if I can compete in an area where everyone says I can't, I can also compete in Washington. Let's go back to the healthcare issue. Yes, I like the choice program. It's a good concept. It lacks some execution, but what I will say is let's make sure we take this choice program to where our veterans can go to a local facility, not let them wait. But I'm also not in favor of a privatized healthcare system for our veterans. It didn't work with our jails, and I refuse to put a separate layer of deniability between the government and our veterans that we promised care to.
Thank you, sir. Ms. Thomas.
That is actually part of my veterans plan that's on our website, to allow veterans to make their own healthcare decisions, and that they want to seek private care. That is the least that we can do for our veterans who have given us the freedoms to be able to be here in this room today. And because of my plan on veterans and because of my life story, I've been endorsed by Dale Doss. He's about 80 years old. He lives in Tallahassee. and he was a POW in the Hanoi Hilton, where he was tortured each and every day and stood for our freedoms. I've also been endorsed by the chairman of the Florida House of Representatives Veterans and Military Affairs Subcommittee, Representative Jimmy Smith, because they know that I have a plan for veterans, and I will fight for our veterans and give them the respect that they deserve.
Thank you, ma'am. Mr. Sakai.
By all means, I believe that veterans, as I said before, I believe that veterans should be given the freedom to choose where they go. I think that just makes sense. And I'm not convinced that it's necessary that there be this massive federal bureaucracy that attempts to handle what should be handled by the private sector. And it's not as though we're putting a layer between them, because those we're basically saying you can get private. We'll give you the funds. You can get private medical care just like everyone else, and you won't have to wait in all those lines that you've been waiting in. So that's how I feel.
And Dr. Dunn, you have final word on this.
Thank you. I mentioned I am a veteran. Obviously, this is a problem that's very close to my heart. Yes, they should have the choice. Yes, they should be able to go to the physician of their choice. And yes, the money from the VA should follow them. So that if the care isn't being given at the VA, the money that goes to the VA decreases. And that's important, so that you get some control on the size of the bureaucracy that you're dealing with. I also agree that we should not put another layer of deniability between the patients and their physicians and their hospitals. And you're all experiencing that right now, whether you're a veteran or you're in private. The best health care, private insurance in the country puts all these layers of deniability in front of you. For the veterans, it's much worse, I promise you that. In terms of veterans endorsements, I have an embarrassingly large number of veterans endorsing me and working for me. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. And Ms. Thomas, you'll be first up with this question. This was submitted by the audience, and obviously a lot of emotion and a lot of exclamation points and underlining, so I'm going to read it just as it was submitted. This government is populated with career politicians riding the taxpayer sugar tit for life after being elected only once. What is your plan, and this is all in capital letters, what is your plan for helping end this population of political leeches?
Well, I think one of the most important things we can do is impose term limits to get the career politicians out of our country. And at 37 years old, I took the lead on signing term limits and the U.S. Term Limits Pledge. And I have also said that I will self-term limit, because many of the problems that we have in Washington are caused by career politicians and insiders. But that's not the end of the story. I'm the only candidate who has put a full ethics reform plan. We need to stop the revolving door from lobbyists to member of Congress to lobbyists, because that's only enriching the lobbyists and the special interest groups and not helping the people of our country. We also need to eliminate congressional pensions. The people of our country don't get these pensions, and Congress certainly shouldn't have them either. And we need to have laws such as the Florida Public Records Law and the Sunshine Law be put at the federal level so that our government is more transparent to we the people. And very importantly, we need to make sure that Congress has to follow the laws that they adopt.
Mr. Sakai.
I also signed the term limit pledge. I think it's a good idea, and I think it's part of the problem. But I think it goes beyond that. I think there's a culture in Washington that is a unique. For instance, I'm told that there are certain car dealerships that only appear in LA and in Saudi Arabia and in Washington, because there's so much money there. And I think when people get up there, they get caught up in that. And that becomes sort of the whole, game. And then they stay there and they become lobbyists. Now, I fought in Florida the lobbyist disclosure bill, which is better known as the lobbyist gift ban. I fought for it and upheld its constitutionality in court. So I have some familiarity with this issue.
Dr. Dunn.
So I am not a politician, and I have no career path leading into Washington. I don't want to be. There's no honeypot for me in Washington. I would much rather be back in Bay County. I feel like all of you do. You want citizen legislators, not career politicians. I would cheerfully sign a term limit pledge if every other congressman would too. The problem is that you give up a lot of seniority to other states. And that's a big problem right here for Florida right now. We do not represent Florida well in our congressional delegations because we have a very junior delegation. With Jeff Miller leaving the Veterans Administration, we have no more chairman left whatsoever. So I don't know what the right term limit is, but as long as it applies to the whole Congress, I'm on board for that. In addition, I do like the lobbyists, politicians to lobbyists, and the transparency. Absolutely like all that. We need to do.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Moran, you have last word on this question.
If anyone has seen my ad, you'll know that I'm not a lobbyist. I'm not an insider government lawyer. I've not appeared in front of Congress for any reason. I've not filed a lawsuit against another state that has actually reduced its effectiveness and been able to clean up some of the water spills and the sewer issues that they have. That's actually been put aside. That's not how we fix problems. I've not sought a single endorsement by any other career politician. I've had others come to me and ask to endorse me, and I think this is something that's a little bit different. I have one politician that has endorsed me, and that's Congressman Ted Yoho. He is the second most conservative and influential person in the state, and either the 5th or the 8th in his freshman class. He sees something in me that he knows he can stand next to me, and I will fight for him.
Thank you, sir. And Mr. Sakaya, you'll be first on this round. This was submitted by our audience just recently. I am a guardian ad litem volunteer, and I've seen firsthand how overburdened the courts, social services, and our law enforcement agencies are due to the drug epidemic that we have in Florida and our nation. What would you do to solve this problem?
I think that the drug laws have not been enforced the way they ought to have been in the last 6 or 7 years. And I think there are a lot of problems with our president. One of them is that he adopts a selective prosecution methodology. He decides not to prosecute illegal immigration cases when he ought to be. He directs his Justice Department not to prosecute certain drug cases, though they are crimes. I feel that it was wrong for Obama to institute an across-the-board reduction in all federal drug sentences: heroin, LSD, cocaine. And that action led to the release of 25,000 federal prisoners last year. But I didn't just think it was wrong. I went to Washington on my own dime to testify before the U.S. Sentencing Commission last year, opposing those changes. So I have acted upon my beliefs in this regard.
Dr. Dunn.
First, let me say, whoever submitted the question about the guardian ad litem program, or with that background, God bless you. I know firsthand that that's a very, very difficult and challenging thing that you're doing. I know that it's very emotional, and it takes a very strong person to do that, so God bless you for that. In terms of the court backlogs and how that affects it, and again, the drug cases, this administration has obviously run roughshod over the laws and made their own laws on how we're going to treat and prosecute things. The fact that they're doing selective prosecutions is an anathema. I mean, they are using the IRS selectively as well to prosecute people. This government no longer makes sense, and we are the victims of that. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Moran.
As a law enforcement officer, I watch firsthand the moral decay and decline in our society, the increased dependency on federal government and its programs. There's some good people out there that are doing some wonderful things. In my own church, we have families that have adopted 6 at-risk children this year. This is where this is supposed to happen. Let's put this back in the hands of us. Let's follow some of our biblical teachings and guidelines, and let's take care of this. Government is not the answer to our problems. Let us decide, let us work with those. Let's streamline some of these processes and get these children in good, loving, caring homes.
Thank you, sir. Ms. Thomas.
I actually have done some volunteer work with the Guardian Ad Litem program, and I think it is a very, very vital program. And as the mom of a 2.5-year-old son, I cannot imagine my son or any child having to undergo these horrific situations. We need to enforce our current laws, but what we also need to do is look at what is causing some of these problems. And that's the moral decline of our country. We're getting away from families, we're getting away from churches, and our own federal government is encouraging this. Our federal government pays more people to, if they have children and they're not married, they get more money. So our federal government is contributing to the moral decline of our country, and that needs to end. We need to protect our families and our churches. And we actually have been going to different churches every Sunday to spread the word all throughout the district. The Christians need to stand up for our conservative and our Christian ideals.
Thank you, ma'am. Dr. Dunn, you'll be first on this round. Which agency would you work toward eliminating first from the federal government?
Education. Did I get it right? That's the easiest. It's the clearest. It has no constitutional basis for existence. And you can solve a lot of problems by getting the education money out of the federal government's hands and getting the employees off the payroll. This is a terrific first place to start.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Moran.
I'll have to ask, are we tired of being lied to? For how many years have we had politicians stand in front of us and promise that they would get rid of a regulatory agency or a department in Washington? It has not happened in our lifetime. I don't see it happening now. Doesn't mean we wish it would, but let's be realistic about what we're going to do. Let's do something different. Let's start under-promising and over-delivering. I'm not going to tell you that I'm going to do something when I go to Washington that I know I can't. Doesn't mean I don't want to, but I'm not going to make promises I can't keep. If it takes lying to you to get elected, then I'll stay here in Columbia County. I'll be at home because I'm not going to do it. Doesn't mean that we don't have agencies that need to be eliminated, but I'm not going to tell you something that I cannot deliver.
Thank you, sir. Ms. Thomas.
One of the major problems that we have in Washington is that people don't have lofty goals and ideals, and that's why we haven't been getting anything accomplished in Washington. We need to fight for a wholesale conservative reform. Ronald Reagan himself ran on repealing the Department of Education. And I think we need to get rid of the Department of Education and put education where it belongs, in the hands of parents and teachers. And we need to repeal Common Core once and for all. Common Core hurts teachers, it harms parents, it harms students. It's an unconstitutional grab of our federal education system. And as a strong constitutional conservative, I believe that any agency that is not delineated in our Constitution needs to be eliminated, and we need to get back to state and local control.
The federal government has very limited responsibilities and roles under the U.S. Constitution. The federal government is limited to setting up a judiciary system to resolve disputes, setting up a banking system, and basically providing for the common defense, the defense of our country against enemies, foreign and domestic. And we have forgotten this in our country. We now have a $19 trillion debt. Now think about that. If we were to stop paying or stop borrowing tomorrow and start paying that debt off at the rate of $10 million a day, it would take us 5,000 years to pay that debt off. And that doesn't even include the interest. Now we need to get back to the fundamentals here. Our government is doing far more things than it should ever have been allowed to do. And I do think, in honoring the question that was asked, what agency would you seek to remove? I would think that is a perfect target. That is the Department of Education.
Thank you, sir. This is our last question in our regular questions, after which you'll all have a period of time to wrap up. And Mr. Moran, you start on this one. This is our 20th question. What is the role and job description of Florida Congressional District 2 representative?
First, I'd like to say that I take exception that I don't have lofty goals. But I'll tell you this, how many years ago was Ronald Reagan president and his goal was to get rid of the Department of Education? He didn't do it. I'm not going to tell you I can do something that I'm not. What is our role? Our role is to represent the people that are sitting in front of me. So what will I do? I will reflect your voices, your concerns in Washington. That is what we're there for. We are to be your voice. We are to represent your wants and your needs, not anything that affects us. I'm not going up there to be reelected. I'm not going up there to amass power. I'm going to go up to Washington to reflect your needs and let your voice be heard.
Ms. Thomas.
I believe that the role of a representative is to represent the people of our district, not the lobbyists and special interest groups. And that's why we have been traveling 1,800 miles plus on the car every single week since July, meeting with people all throughout the district. And when I'm going out to a farm, I'm not just meeting with the head farmer. I'm meeting with the ranch hands and everyone on the farm, waiters and waitresses. Everyone is important. Every person is a voter and they need to be represented. And that's not been happening in Washington. The lobbyists and special interest groups have control over our country. And we need to kick them out. And that's why we need things such as term limits. We need to get strong constitutional conservatives who will defend our Constitution and who will defend Christianity and stand up for the people.
Thank you, ma'am. Mr. Sakai.
I feel that whatever I have accomplished in life has resulted not from my own works or my own even abilities, but it's a matter of God's grace. He's put me in these positions, and I believe I have to be a servant leader in whatever position I'm in. And I think, particularly if you're running for Congress, you are a servant of the people. You are not the person that should be benefiting from this. You should be a servant to them and do their will and their bidding, and place other people's interests ahead of your own, and look out not for your own interests but for the interests of others. And that would be my goal as your congressman.
Thank you, sir. And Dr. Dunn, you finish this up.
Thank you very much. I think the first role of any congressman is easily delineated, which is to follow his oath of office. When I was a young officer in the Army, we took an oath to support and defend the Constitution of the United States against all enemies, foreign and domestic, to bear true faith and allegiance to same. That happens to be the same oath that a congressman takes when assuming office. That's the first role that any congressman should follow. And I believe that if he follows that role, that he will be representing the people of the 2nd Congressional District of Florida very well indeed. And he has to represent the people of Florida. He has to represent their interests there. And that is another one of his roles. Do those two things, you got a good congressman. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. All of these candidates are going to have 1 minute to wrap up and sort of sum up their thoughts about it this evening. We'd like to thank them very much for all attending tonight. All have acceded to our invitation to join us on the campus of Florida Panhandle Technical College and engage in one of our political interviews, the candidate interviews, part of our Meet the Candidates series, and which you'll also be able to hear on FPTC Radio, the brand new college radio station. So we thank them all for that. We thank you for your attendance. I know once we get done, everybody starts to scurry around. These folks are going to stay here for a few minutes after they wrap up, so if you have any questions you'd like to ask of any of them specifically, certainly there's collateral on the table. We'd like to thank the Republican Executive Committee for making this possible. Most importantly, Gloria and Don Potts, owner of the Historic Dance Theater. I think you'll agree it's a beautiful venue. They actually have 2 more venues in the same block. Lots of opportunities if you have a political get-together that you're trying to schedule, or maybe a wedding or a bridal shower or something like that, or a full-blown wedding. So I want to give them a shameless plug because frankly they're really stepping up to the plate and allowing us to use this facility. So we appreciate that. Also, something that we've been asking each of these successive forums, do you feel that these are a worthwhile expenditure of your and our time, and if we were to go forward with more of these in the future, do you feel that they would be worthwhile?
Yes.